The wine bottle felt heavier than it should have in my hand. I stood in the supermarket aisle, staring at rows of labels that blurred together under fluorescent lights. December 23rd, and the store smelled like cinnamon and exhaustion. I'd been standing there for 10 minutes, trying to choose something that would matter, something that would be noticed. It wouldn't be noticed, I knew that. But I chose carefully anyway, running my thumb over the label of a 2019 Bordeaux that cost more than I usually spent. The kind of wine you bring when you want to say something without speaking. The kind that gets poured into glasses and forgotten while someone else takes credit for the evening. My phone buzzed. The family group chat. Lena had posted a photo of her dining room table, already set with gold chargers and white linens. The caption read, "Can't wait for everyone to see what I've planned. Christmas magic incoming." 47 reactions. Heart emojis. Fire emojis. My sister Marlene commented, "You're so talented." I scrolled up. The last message I'd sent was 3 days ago. Happy to bring wine and dessert if needed. 0 reactions. No responses. While you're here, don't forget to subscribe, hit the hype button, and support this channel with a like. And tell us below. Have you ever faced something like this? I pocketed my phone and headed to checkout. The cashier was young, maybe 20, wearing a Santa hat that had gone limp from a long shift. She scanned my wine without looking at me, without asking if I'd found everything okay, without any of the small courtesies that used to make shopping feel human. $42.50, she said, still not meeting my eyes. I handed her my card, watched her swipe it, watched her bag the bottle with the kind of carelessness that suggested she'd stopped caring about broken glass hours ago. Receipt? No, thank you. She was already looking past me to the next customer before I'd finished speaking. I walked through the parking lot, December wind cutting through my jacket. The sky was that particular shade of gray that comes right before snow, heavy and waiting. Cars sat in neat rows, their windshields frosted at the edges. Mine was near the back, a 10-year-old sedan that ran perfectly but looked forgettable, just like me. At home, my kitchen was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that settles into a house when you live alone and nobody asks how your day went. I set the wine on the counter next to the gifts I'd wrapped the night before. Thoughtful things, specific things. A first edition book for Grant that I'd hunted down on 3 different websites. The seller had been in Oregon, and I'd paid extra for expedited shipping to make sure it arrived in time. Grant had mentioned this book once, maybe 8 months ago in passing. He probably didn't even remember saying it. For Marlene, I'd chosen a cashmere scarf in the exact shade of blue she'd mentioned loving 6 months ago. We'd been at a department store together, shopping for my nephew's birthday, and she'd stopped at a display and said, "That color. That's the color of the lake at our grandmother's cottage in September." Then she'd moved on, and I'd gone back later and taken a photo of the shade, carried it with me until I found a match. For Lena, I'd chosen a vintage photograph frame, Art Deco style, because I'd heard her mention it once at a barbecue last summer while everyone else was talking over her. She'd been showing someone photos on her phone, and she'd said, "I wish I had one of those old deco frames for this, the geometric ones from the 20s. Nobody had acknowledged her. I'd been 30 feet away, pretending to check the grill. I'd listened. I always listened. That was my problem, maybe. I heard everything and said nothing. My phone buzzed again. The group chat. Grant. Mom's bringing her famous cookies. Lena. Amazing. We'll have such a spread. Marlene. Should I bring champagne or stick with sparkling cider? Lena. Champagne for sure. This is a celebration. I typed, I have a nice Bordeaux. Should I bring anything else? I watched the 3 dots appear, then disappear. Appear again. It took 90 seconds for a response. I counted. Lena. Oh, Evan. You're so sweet. Just bring yourself. That's all we need. 3 heart emojis. From my daughter-in-law. The same woman who'd told someone at Thanksgiving that I had old person energy and was kind of a conversation stopper. I'd been standing right behind her. She hadn't noticed. Grant had noticed. I'd seen his jaw tighten, seen the way his eyes found mine across the room. But he'd said nothing. He'd squeezed her shoulder and changed the subject, and I'd pretended I hadn't heard, pretended it didn't matter, pretended I was fine with being the kind of person whose presence stopped conversations. I set my phone down and stared at the wine bottle. Something about it bothered me. Something about all of it bothered me. The careful wrapping, the thoughtful gifts, the expensive wine, all of it felt like shouting into a void, like throwing messages in bottles into an ocean that never threw anything back. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, I considered not answering. just staying in my quiet kitchen with my expensive wine and my carefully chosen gifts, pretending I was somewhere else, someone whose doorbell rang with good news. But I answered. Victor stood on my porch, collar turned up against the December wind, holding a manila folder and wearing the expression of a man who'd walked into too many bad situations to be surprised by anything. "You called," he said. "I called." We'd worked together for 15 years before he retired and went into private consulting. Financial consulting, legal consulting, the kind of work that involved a lot of paperwork and very few questions. He was 66 and looked 50, moved like a man who'd spent his life being exactly where he needed to be. We'd been good colleagues, maybe even friends, though neither of us had ever tested that definition too hard. I let him in, made coffee the way I knew he liked it. Black, strong, no sugar. We sat at my kitchen table, the folder between us, unopened. The coffee steamed in white mugs that had been wedding gifts 35 years ago, my wife's favorite set. I'd kept them even though most of the set was gone now, broken over decades of use. "Talk to me," Victor said. So I did. I told him about the family dynamics, about Lena's carefully constructed image, about the way she'd slowly repositioned me from father to furniture. I told him about the financial help I'd given them 3 years ago when they bought their house. $50,000 for the down payment, how the paperwork had been casual, friendly, family stuff. How I'd never asked for repayment, because that's what you do. You help your kids, you don't keep score, you don't make them feel like they owe you. I told him about the jokes, the small cuts, the way she'd rearranged holiday traditions so that I was always on the periphery, always the last to know, always the easiest to forget. How last Christmas I'd shown up with gifts and found out there was a white elephant exchange I hadn't been told about. How everyone had laughed when Grant offered to share his gift with me. How Lena had said, "Oh, I thought I texted you. My bad," with eyes that sparkled with something that wasn't apology. I told him about Easter, when I'd brought my mother's potato salad, the recipe I'd perfected over 30 years, and Lena had taken one look and said, "Oh, we're doing more of a modern aesthetic this year. Maybe just keep that in the kitchen?" It had stayed there, untouched, while everyone ate her catered spread. I'd taken it home at the end of the night, the bowl still full, and thrown it away. Victor listened without interrupting. When I finished, he opened the folder. "I did some preliminary looking," he said, "based on what you mentioned last week." Inside were copies of texts, printed emails, bank records. Things I'd gathered quietly over months, not because I was paranoid, but because I'd learned that memory wasn't enough, that when someone tells you you're imagining things, you need proof that you're not crazy. "This is solid," Victor said, tapping a printed text exchange. "If you decide to move forward." "I haven't decided anything." "Yes, you have?" He closed the folder. "You called me. That's deciding." He stood, left his coffee half finished, and headed for the door. At the threshold, he turned back. "Evan, whatever you're planning, keep it clean, keep it legal, and keep it simple." "I'm not planning anything." Victor smiled, the kind of smile that said he'd heard that before. "Merry Christmas." After he left, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the wine bottle and the unopened folder. My phone buzzed. Group chat. Lena again. "Save the special toast for later. I have a plan." My chest tightened. I read it 3 times. I have a plan. I picked up my phone and opened my calendar, scrolled forward. Stopped at December 24th, Christmas Eve, tomorrow. I sat there for a long time, thinking about plans, about toasts, about the way a person could be erased slowly, politely, until they wondered if they'd ever been there at all. Thinking about my wife, who'd been gone 5 years now, who'd known how to navigate family politics, who'd always made sure I was included, always made sure my voice was heard. She'd been the bridge, and when she'd gone, the bridge had collapsed, and I'd been standing on the wrong side. Then I stood, collected the gifts, and put them by the front door. Tomorrow would come whether I was ready or not. The memories didn't come back as a clean, continuous reel. They arrived in jagged pieces, sharp, vivid, and unmistakably deliberate, like someone dropping shards of glass into my hands and telling me to hold them tight. Last Christmas, Lena had organized a white elephant gift exchange. She'd coordinated the rules, the budget, even the order in which the gifts would be picked. She'd done all of it through the family group chat, except she hadn't told me, not a word, not even an accidental mention. Everyone else showed up with something wrapped and ready, joking about the weird presents they'd brought. I stood there empty-handed, trying to mask the instinctive embarrassment rising in my chest. Grant, bless him, had stepped forward immediately, offering to share his gift with me, his face strained with a kind of guilt he shouldn't have needed to feel. And Lena, she'd laughed, tossed her hair, and said brightly, "Oh, I thought I texted you. My bad." But her eyes had betrayed her. They held a cold, sharp satisfaction. They told the truth. She hadn't forgotten. Excluding me was the point. Watching me stand alone while everyone else participated had been the present she'd wrapped for herself. The Christmas before that, she'd rearranged the seating chart, claiming she wanted a fun mix-up. But somehow this mix-up resulted in a kids' table, despite there being no children present. I ended up seated with Marlene's teenage nephews, who spent the entire evening talking about video game strategies I couldn't pretend to follow. Every time I attempted to join the adult conversation at the main table, someone interrupted, talked over me, or shifted the topic without acknowledging what I'd said. After an hour of chasing threads that slipped away the moment I touched them, I stopped trying. The message had been loud, subtle, and humiliating. You don't belong here, not with us. Easter. She'd sent out the annual message. Everyone bring a dish. And I'd taken it seriously. I'd made my mother's potato salad, the recipe I'd honed over 3 decades. The same one neighbors used to ask me to bring to block parties. The same one my late wife said was her favorite. When I placed it on the counter, proudly, Lena took one glance and wrinkled her nose. Oh, we're doing more of a modern aesthetic this year. Maybe just keep that in the kitchen? She said it casually, like she was adjusting a centerpiece. The salad stayed untouched, forgotten, ignored behind a stack of disposable cups. At the end of the night, I found it exactly where I'd left it. Plastic wrap sealed, condensation untouched. Not a single spoon mark. Not a single glance. Something inside me had tightened then. Quietly, almost imperceptibly. 4th of July. She'd thrown a barbecue and filled social media with photos. Perfectly curated shots of grilled food, smiling faces, and glowing fairy lights. I had been in the background of several of those photos, standing next to the grill, talking to Grant, carrying chairs. I knew because I'd seen the originals on Grant's phone when he proudly showed off the shots he'd taken. But when Lena posted them, every single one had been cropped, skillfully, surgically, as if I'd never been there at all. I only found out when Marlene commented under one of the posts, "Where's Evan? Didn't he come?" And Lena replied, "Oh, Evan couldn't make it this year." She typed that lie while standing 20 feet from me, phone in hand, expression unchanged. And so here I was, standing in my garage, the one place that had stayed entirely mine. After my wife passed 5 years ago, this space had become my refuge, my workspace, my quiet corner of the world where no one corrected me, ignored me, or cropped me out of anything. Tools hung neatly on pegboards, arranged by size and function. The air smelled like cedar and oil and order. On the center of my workbench sat a cardboard box. Inside it were folders, labeled, dated, categorized. I hadn't meant to start collecting evidence. Not at first. But 2 years ago, something in me had shifted. Grant had pulled me aside at a barbecue, his face soft with discomfort, and said, "Dad, I'm sorry about Lena. She doesn't mean it." His voice had carried a plea. He wanted me to believe the best. I'd nodded, told him it was fine, told him I understood, but I'd gone home that night and realized I didn't. I didn't understand her, and more importantly, I didn't trust her. So I'd started watching. Not obsessively, just honestly. And honesty revealed a lot. The folders held printouts of group chats where messages skipped me, screenshots of family photos from which I'd been surgically erased, thank you notes that had never reached me, even for gifts I knew I'd given, a birthday card supposedly from Grant, except Lena had signed it herself, her handwriting crowding out the space where his should have been. When I'd called to thank him, his confusion had been genuine. He hadn't sent it. She had. Tiny slights, petty omissions, each insignificant on its own. But together they formed a pattern, and patterns always matter. I lifted the folder labeled Financial. Inside were copies of loan documents, $50,000 I'd given them for their down payment. No deadline, no interest, no pressure, family helping family. Beside those papers lay a recent bank statement, $70,000 deposited into their account from Lena's parents 3 months earlier. And then there was the text exchange. I hadn't gone looking for it. Grant had been driving, had asked me to check a message. When I unlocked his phone, the screen had opened to his conversation with Lena, and before I could redirect my eyes, I saw a preview of another thread. Lena talking to her friend Rachel. "Lena, we can finally renovate. E will never notice. He barely remembers what he loaned us anyway. Old guys don't track that stuff. Rachel, are you sure? What if he asks? Lena, he won't. And if he does, I'll just cry and say we're struggling. He's too soft to push back." I had taken a photo of it. My hand didn't even shake. I saved it to the folder and spent the car ride silently watching the scenery pass by, feeling something inside me quietly, permanently rearrange itself. My phone rang. Grant. Hey, Dad. Hey, son. You coming tomorrow? Of course. A pause that felt meaningful. Good. I need you there. Something tightened in my chest. Not fear, not dread, but awareness. Grant sounded careful in a way that reminded me of his childhood, when he struggled to express something important without knowing how to say it. I could hear it again now, that same tension. Something was happening. Everything okay? I asked. Yeah, just be there, okay? I will be. When the call ended, I stared at the folders spread across the bench. Victor was right. I'd already made my decision long before tonight. The question was no longer if, it was how and when. My phone buzzed again. Grant. Wear something nice. This is important. Important. That word lingered, colder and heavier than it should have been. Grant never instructed me on clothing. He never labeled holiday dinners as important. Weddings were important. Funerals were important. Turning points were important. Christmas Eve dinner had never been anything but routine. I typed back, always do, and set my phone down, but I kept staring at the message long after it dimmed. Something was unfolding, something not orchestrated by Lena this time, something Grant knew about and I didn't, and for the first time in a long time, that uncertainty didn't make me feel small. It felt like possibility, like ignition, like wind gathering behind a door that was about to blow open. I gathered the folders, returned them to the box, closed it carefully. Tomorrow I would bring the wine and the gifts and my silence. But I'd also bring the folder. Not to use. Not unless I had to. Inside my bedroom, I laid out clothes for tomorrow, dark tailored slacks, the pressed shirt Grant once complimented, and the navy wool sweater he'd chosen for me himself 2 Christmases ago, back when his gifts were personal and thoughtful, before Lena started picking out generic things that required no emotion or consideration. I ran my hand over the sweater. It felt warm, familiar, honest. A piece of my son's genuine affection, untouched by anyone else's influence. I folded it neatly and placed it on top of the outfit. Then I lay down in bed. And despite the late hour, despite the quiet, despite the stillness of the house, I did not sleep. Christmas Eve morning broke cold and gray. I dressed deliberately. Dark slacks, a pressed shirt, the wool sweater Grant had given me 2 years ago. Not the current Grant, the one married to image management. The old Grant, the one who'd known his father's favorite color and cared enough to remember. I looked at myself in the mirror, 62 years old, gray at the temples, lines around my eyes from smiling more than I probably should have. My wife used to say I had kind eyes. Lena probably thought they were weak. I ran my hand over my jaw, feeling stubble I'd missed while shaving. Close enough, good enough. I'd learned not to aim for perfection anymore. Nobody noticed anyway. The present sat by the door, wrapped in simple paper. No bows, no ribbons, just clean edges and careful corners. The wine bottle stood beside them, the label catching morning light through the window. I picked up my phone. The group chat was already active. Lena, 2 hours until appetizers, can't wait to see everyone. Marlene, bringing champagne and my famous spinach dip. Mom, cookies are packed and ready. Grant, running late but we'll be ready. Lena, you're always running late, babe. Good thing I planned ahead. 3 laughing emojis. A dozen reactions. I pocketed my phone without responding. What would I say? That I was ready, that I was coming, they already knew that. Or they assumed it. I was furniture. Furniture doesn't need to confirm its attendance. The drive to their house took 20 minutes through quiet suburban streets. Houses decorated with lights, inflatable snowmen, projection displays that turned entire lawns into winter wonderlands. Their neighborhood competed every year, each house trying to outdo the next. Some of them must have spent thousands on decorations alone. Grant and Lena's house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, tastefully decorated with white lights and evergreen wreaths. Classy, understated, expensive. Everything Lena touched looked expensive, even when it wasn't. Even when it was my money that had made it possible. I parked on the street, gathered my things, and walked to the door. The sidewalk was freshly shoveled, the walkway lined with luminarias that probably cost $3 each. I counted 16 of them, $48 in paper bags and candles that would burn for one night. I rang the bell. Lena answered, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than my monthly utilities. Her smile was perfect, practiced, the kind you use on people you're trying to impress or dismiss. I'd never figured out which category I fell into, maybe both. Evan, you're early. I checked my watch. You said 4. It's 4. Oh, did I say 4? I meant 4:30. She stepped aside, letting me in. Well, you're here now. Come in, come in. The house smelled like pine and cinnamon. Their living room looked like a magazine spread, matching decorations, coordinated colors, not a single thing out of place. A massive tree stood in the corner, professionally decorated with gold and white ornaments. No handmade ornaments, no mismatched lights, no evidence of real memories. Just hired perfection. Under the tree, presents were arranged by size, labels facing out. I recognized my wrapped boxes, already placed in the back row, half hidden behind larger, flashier gifts wrapped in metallic paper with elaborate bows. Where should I put these? I held up the wine and gifts. Oh, just anywhere, Lena waved vaguely. Grant's in the kitchen. Make yourself comfortable. She disappeared down the hallway, heels clicking on hardwood. I found Grant standing at the island, arranging cheese and crackers on a wooden board. He looked up when I entered, and something passed across his face. Relief? Worry? I couldn't tell. But it was real, whatever it was. Not the polite acknowledgement I usually got. Real emotion. Dad. Son. We stood there, a kitchen island between us, and I saw him really look at me. Not the quick glance of a busy son, but the full attention of someone taking inventory. He looked tired. Lines around his eyes I hadn't noticed before. Gray starting at his temples. When had that happened? You okay? He asked. Fine. You? Yeah. He set down the cheese knife. Listen. Grant, Lena's voice called from somewhere in the house. Where did you put the good napkins? He closed his eyes briefly. Linen closet. Which shelf? Third from the top? Which side? Left? Are you sure? Grant's jaw tightened. Yes. When he opened his eyes again, whatever he'd been about to say was gone. He picked up the cheese knife and went back to arranging crackers in careful circles. I set the wine on the counter. Brought a Bordeaux. Thanks. He didn't look at it. You might want to hold on to that, actually. Lena has something specific planned for toasts. The group chat mentioned that. Yeah. His jaw tightened again. She has a plan. The way he said it made something cold settle in my stomach. I'd heard that tone before. The tone that meant trouble was coming and he couldn't stop it. The tone he'd used when he was 16 and had wrecked my car and knew I'd find out eventually. The tone that meant brace yourself. Grant. Guests at 5, he interrupted. Dinner at 6. Should be a good night. But his eyes said the opposite. His eyes said survive this. I left him in the kitchen and wandered into the living room. Through the back windows, I could see their patio, the one they'd renovated last spring with money that should have gone toward repaying me. New furniture, new grill, new fire pit, new everything. $70,000 worth of new. Courtesy of Lena's parents. While my $50,000 sat on their books as forgotten history. I stood there, watching afternoon shadows stretch across perfect landscaping, and wondered what I was doing here. Wondered why I kept coming back to a place where I was tolerated but not wanted. Wondered when I'd become the kind of father who accepted crumbs and called it a relationship. My phone buzzed. Text from Victor. Remember, clean, legal, simple. I didn't respond. Just stood there, watching shadows grow longer, waiting for 5 o'clock and whatever Lena had planned. The doorbell rang. Marlene's voice carried through the house, warm and familiar. I heard Lena greet her, heard the sound of presents being added to the pile under the tree. Marlene, you look amazing. Oh, stop. You're the one who looks like she stepped out of a catalog. Laughter, genuine warmth. Lena could do that. Could make people feel special, valued, seen. Just not me. More voices, more arrivals. The house filled with people I barely knew, friends of Lena's from her book club, her yoga class, her networking groups. They air-kissed and complimented and laughed at jokes that weren't funny, the kind of forced merriment that comes from people who are performing friendship rather than living it. I stood in the corner, holding a glass of water, and watched. Nobody approached me. Nobody asked how I'd been. Nobody made eye contact long enough to require conversation. I was furniture again. Background. The father-in-law who existed only in relation to Grant, who mattered only as a prop in Lena's perfect family picture. Except Grant kept looking at me, across the room, through conversations, over people's heads. He kept checking, kept watching, like he was making sure I was still there, like he was afraid I'd leave, or hoping I wouldn't, and I was. I would be. Whatever was coming, I wasn't leaving until it arrived. The dining room table could technically seat 12, though it usually held 8 comfortably. Tonight, Lena had pushed it to its limits, arranging places for 14. Extra chairs, mismatched, borrowed from neighbors, had been squeezed in at awkward angles. Some wobbled, some sat too low. All of them made the arrangement feel cramped in a way that looked intentional rather than improvisational. The name cards, of course, were elegant, glossy cardstock printed with looping calligraphy, each one placed with the precision of someone staging a photograph. Mine was at the far end of the table, so distant from the head that I might as well have been dining in a different zip code. I discovered it while pretending to admire the centerpiece, a towering display of white roses, gold-dipped branches, and pine sprigs dusted with glitter. Overdone, dramatic, everything Lena aspired to be. My place card sat between two empty chairs. Bethany on one side, Marcus on the other. I didn't know either of them. Their names meant nothing to me, which was probably the point. Lena had placed me with strangers rather than with anyone I might naturally talk to. Grant's card sat at the head of the table, Lena's directly to his right, her preferred position of power. Marlene was 3 seats down on the left, orbiting close to where conversations naturally bloomed. Everyone else clustered toward the center section, the warm core where laughter, debate, and storytelling would spark. I would be at the fringe, at the cold perimeter, present but irrelevant. I didn't say a word. I simply straightened my card, as though that small gesture might restore some dignity, and stepped away. At 5:30, Lena swept out of the kitchen wearing a crisp new apron that somehow looked like part of a designer outfit. She clapped her hands with practiced enthusiasm, and conversations halted instantly. "Okay, everyone," she sang. "Appetizers are ready in the dining room. Help yourselves, mingle, and we'll do dinner at 6 sharp." People obeyed. They always did. The group moved as a unit, flowing around me the way a stream breaks around an unmoving rock. Grant appeared beside me like an anchor finally catching soil. "You found your seat?" he asked. "I did," I said simply. He looked toward the table, his expression flickering with something he tried to hide. "Dad, it's fine," I cut in. "It's not fine." I held his gaze. "Then change it." The space between us filled with the words we weren't speaking. He wanted me to read something beneath the surface. I wanted him to take action, real, tangible action. "Just trust me," he said finally, voice low, serious. "Tonight, trust me." Before I could respond, Lena drifted by, perfume trailing behind her like a signature. She slipped her arm through Grant's and pulled him toward a cluster of her friends, laughing as though nothing in the world could go wrong. Grant looked back once, a quiet apology in his eyes before letting himself be led away. I found my seat again, sat down. The chair to my left remained empty. Apparently Bethany wasn't coming after all. The chair to my right filled with Marcus, who arrived 15 minutes late and immediately struck up a lively conversation with the person on his other side, deliberately turning his back toward me. Dinner began with ceremony. Lena had spared no effort, no expense. A roasted turkey with perfectly bronzed skin, honey-glazed ham, glossy and aromatic. 4 kinds of potatoes arranged like curated exhibits. 3 vegetable dishes, colorful and artfully plated. Fresh rolls stacked like warm clouds. 2 salads drizzled with something artisanal. Everything perfect, everything curated, everything meant to impress. Plates circulated, glasses clinked, conversations blossomed and converged at the table's center. The middle seats were a vortex of warmth, stories, laughter, camaraderie, while the edges remained cool and quiet. I ate slowly, deliberately. The food was good. I forced myself to notice that. The turkey was moist. The glaze on the ham was flawless. Even the rolls were still warm from the oven. Marcus never acknowledged me, not a single word. When he needed the salt shaker that sat directly in front of me, he spoke past me, literally, to the person 2 seats beyond, as though asking me directly was somehow inconvenient. When he laughed at jokes from the table's lively side, he angled his body completely away, shutting me out with the physicality of someone closing a door. I might as well have been invisible. Dessert arrived, a spread so decadent it drew genuine gasps. 3 pies, layered cakes, something chocolate and molten that made people close their eyes in exaggerated delight. Coffee followed, the kind that came with its own aroma cloud. Then Lena stood, wineglass in hand. The room stilled under her command. "Everyone," she tapped her glass with a fork. The sound rang through the dining room, crisp and theatrical. "Before we finish, I want to make a special toast." The sudden hush was palpable. 14 people, poised between admiration and expectation. She beamed, radiant, confident, glowing with the pleasure of being watched. "This has been such an amazing year," she declared. "Grant and I have so much to be grateful for. Our beautiful home, this incredible family, and all of you who make our lives so full." Nods, smiles, approval radiated back at her. "And I wanted to do something special tonight," she continued. "Something to show my appreciation for the people who've supported us." Her eyes found mine across the length of the table. Her smile sharpened. Especially family. Evan, this toast is for you. Every head turned. In an instant, I became visible again, not seen but displayed. She lifted a wine bottle, one I hadn't brought, and approached me, heels clicking on hardwood like punctuation marks. When she reached my seat, she poured wine into my glass, filling it to the brim with deliberate precision. "You've been so generous," she said loudly, ensuring her voice carried. "So patient, so understanding. We couldn't have done any of this without you." Her gaze met mine, and the mask slipped. Triumph glinted behind her eyes. Cold, calculated. "So this toast is for you, Evan, for everything you've given us, for all your contributions." Contributions? A word sharpened into a weapon, wrapped in sarcasm, polished for maximum effect. Around the table, subtle discomfort rustled like a breeze. Marlene frowned. I looked at the wine glass, then at Lena, then at Grant. Grant wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the wine, at my wine. "Thank you," I said quietly. "That's very kind." Lena turned, returning to her throne near the head of the table. She poured wine for herself, for Grant, for those within her inner circle. The room's warmth resumed, but unease lingered around the edges. I lifted my glass, tilted it toward the overhead light. The wine was darker than it should have been, too dark. A faint cloudiness settled at the bottom like sediment that didn't quite belong. A small, instinctive warning flashed through me. I set the glass down. Grant caught my eye, gave a subtle nod, a signal, a confirmation. Then, in a motion so smooth it felt rehearsed, he reached across the table while Lena was mid-conversation with Marlene and swapped his glass with mine. He did it with the ease of someone who had thought about this moment long before tonight. Lena turned back, lifted the glass, my glass, without a second thought. "To family," she announced. "To family," the table echoed. She drank deeply, a full, confident swallow. 3 seconds passed, then 5, then 10. Her expression shifted. Color drained from her face. Her throat bobbed. She set the glass down with a clatter she tried to disguise. "Excuse me," she whispered, strained and thin. She stood abruptly and walked toward the hallway, too fast to be casual, too slow to be panic. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. Someone coughed. Grant set his glass down with care, stood, looked around the table with an expression I had never seen on him before, steady, resolved, razor-focused. "I think," he said, voice calm and controlled, "we need to talk about something." My pulse thudded in my chest. Grant circled the table, stopped beside me, rested a firm hand on my shoulder. "When I tell them what she tried to do," he murmured low enough for only me, "watch their faces." From the hallway came a sound, sharp, startled, panicked. Lena's voice strained. "Grant." He squeezed my shoulder once, an anchor, and then walked toward the hallway, leaving me seated at the end of the table, surrounded by a sea of uncertainty. I didn't move, didn't speak. My untouched wine glass sat in front of me, and I waited. Grant didn't come back immediately. The hallway swallowed him, and the dining room sat in thick, uncomfortable silence. 14 people, all trying not to look at each other. Marlene was the first to speak. "Is she okay?" Nobody answered. I pushed back from the table, stood. My legs felt steadier than they should have. "I should check," I said. I walked through the dining room, through the living room, following voices to the back hallway. Grant stood outside the bathroom door, arms crossed, face unreadable. Inside, I could hear running water and sharp breathing. "She okay?" I asked. "She will be." Grant still didn't look at me. Ipecac syrup. Not harmful. It just forces intense vomiting for about 20 minutes. My stomach dropped. "What?" "She put it in your wine." Now he looked at me. I watched her. In the kitchen, when everyone was arriving, she thought I was busy with the appetizers, but I saw her slip something into a glass. Your glass. The one she made such a show of giving you. I couldn't speak. "Why?" I finally managed. "Because you're easy to humiliate. Because she thought it would be funny to watch you get sick at her perfect dinner party. Because she wanted you to run to the bathroom in front of everyone, wanted them to think you couldn't handle your wine, wanted to make you small." His jaw was tight. "She told her friend about it. Texted her during appetizers. I saw the message on her Apple Watch when she hugged me." From inside the bathroom, retching sounds, then crying. Grant knocked. "Lena, come out." "I can't." "You can, and you will." Silence. Then the sound of the lock clicking open. Lena emerged. She looked destroyed. makeup smeared, dress stained, hair falling from its careful arrangement. When she saw me standing there, her face went white. "Evan, Don't." Grant's voice cut like a knife. "Don't say anything to him. You've said enough. It was a joke. It was assault." He said it clearly, calmly. "You dosed someone's drink without their knowledge. That's a felony in this state." Her eyes widened. "You're not serious. Grant, come on. It was just what? Just humiliating my father at Christmas dinner? Just making him sick in front of strangers? Just proving that you can do whatever you want without consequences?" He stepped closer to her. "I'm done pretending I don't see what you do. I'm done defending you. I'm done." "We can talk about this later," she whispered. "Please. The guests need to know what kind of person you are." He walked past her, back toward the dining room. "Come on." She grabbed his arm. "Grant, please, don't do this." He looked at her hand on his arm, looked at her face, and something in his expression made her let go. "You did this," he said quietly. "Own it." We walked back to the dining room, all three of us. A strange, terrible procession. The table full of people looked up when we entered. Their faces showed confusion, concern, curiosity. Marlene half stood from her chair. Grant walked to the head of the table, pulled out his phone, set it on the table where everyone could see. "I need to show you all something," he said, "because you deserve to know what kind of evening you almost witnessed." Lena stood frozen near the doorway. I stood near the Christmas tree, watching. Grant tapped his phone. A text conversation appeared, projected onto the wall behind him. He'd planned this, every bit of it. The texts were from Lena to her friend Rachel, time-stamped from earlier that evening. Lena: "Okay, it's in his glass. This is going to be hilarious." Rachel: "You're terrible. What if someone notices?" Lena: "Nobody notices him. That's the whole point. He'll be puking in 10 min and everyone will think he's just a drunk old man who can't handle his wine." Rachel: "OMG, you're evil." Lena: "He deserves it. Always hanging around, always making things awkward. This is my house, my party. He doesn't get to make it about him." The room was frozen, every person staring at the wall, then at Lena, then at Grant. Grant tapped again. Another conversation appeared, older, from 6 weeks ago. Lena to another friend: "FYI, we're never paying back that loan from Evan. He won't even remember in a year. Old people don't track money like we do." Friend: "Are you serious? That's kind of messed up." Lena: "It's not messed up. It's strategic. He wanted to feel important. I let him. Now he's served his purpose." Another tap. Another conversation. From last Christmas. Lena to Rachel: "Putting him at the kids' table tonight. Going to say it was an accident if anyone asks. But honestly, he belongs there. He acts like a child, always needing attention." The texts kept coming. Months of them. A timeline of casual cruelty, calculated dismissals, deliberate humiliation. Every message projected 12 feet high for everyone to read. Someone at the table gasped. Marlene's hand covered her mouth. Grant turned off his phone. The wall went blank. "This is my wife," he said to the room. "This is who she is when she thinks nobody's watching." Grant looked at Lena. "Except I've been watching for a year now. Watching you tear down my father. Watching you manipulate our family. Watching you turn our life into a performance where kindness is weakness and cruelty is clever." Grant, her voice broke. "I switched the glasses," he continued, "because I knew. I saw you put something in his drink, and I knew that if I didn't stop it, you'd go through with it. You'd humiliate him. And everyone would laugh or feel uncomfortable, and Dad would go home alone like he always does, wondering what he did wrong." He turned to me. "You are enough, Dad. You've always been enough. I'm sorry I let her make you feel otherwise." The room was silent. Nobody moved. Grant walked to his chair, pulled out a folder from beneath his seat, the same type Victor had brought me. "These are copies of the financial records. The loan you gave us, the money her parents gave us that we used for renovations instead of paying you back, the text messages where she called you a mark, a sucker, someone too soft to demand what he's owed." He set the folder on the table. "I've already sent copies to a lawyer, not to sue, not to press charges, but to establish a record. Because when I file for divorce, I want it clear why. I want it documented that I didn't leave because of boredom or restlessness. I left because my wife is cruel." Lena made a sound, not quite a word, something between a sob and a gasp. "You can't," she whispered. "I already did." Grant pulled out another paper. "I met with an attorney last week. Papers are drawn up. You'll be served after the holidays. This house is in both our names, but the down payment came from Dad's loan. Documented. The equity from your parents went into joint renovations. It's complicated, but it's clean. Legal, fair. He looked at everyone at the table. I'm sorry you had to see this. I'm sorry this is how Christmas Eve ends. But I couldn't let it go on. I couldn't watch her do this to him one more time and stay silent. Marlene stood, walked around the table, hugged me without saying a word. I felt her shaking. Other people started gathering their things. Quiet. Awkward. A few stopped to touch my shoulder as they passed. Someone said, I'm sorry. Someone else said, You didn't deserve that. Within 10 minutes, the house was empty except for me, Grant, and Lena. She stood against the wall, makeup ruined, dress stained, everything she'd built crumbling around her. You planned this, she said to Grant. You've been planning this. For months, he agreed. Since last Christmas, when you put him at the kids' table and I realized you enjoyed it, that's when I started paying attention, that's when I started documenting. You let me look like a fool. You did that yourself. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences. She looked at me then, really looked. What do you want from me? I thought about that. Thought about apologies and explanations and all the things she could say that wouldn't matter. Nothing, I said finally. I don't want anything from you. I just want you to know that I saw all of it. Every joke, every slight. Every time you made me small, I saw it. And I'm done pretending I didn't. I walked to the door, picked up my coat. Grant followed me outside. The night was cold and sharp. You okay? He asked. Yeah. I was surprised to find it was true. You? Getting there. He shoved his hands in his pockets. I'm sorry I didn't do this sooner. You did it when you could. We stood there on his driveway, father and son, while Christmas lights blinked on houses up and down the street. Come to Marlene's tomorrow, Grant said. She texted, said she's doing Christmas lunch. Small, quiet, just family who actually give a damn. I'll be there. He hugged me, tight and long, the way he used to when he was little. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. I drove home through the empty streets, the kind of late-night quiet that only happens on holidays when the world seems to hold its breath. The car's heater hummed softly, warming my hands, my face, the small ache in my chest that had lived there too long. For the first time in years, it wasn't a heavy ache. It wasn't grief or frustration or resignation. It was relief. The wine bottle sat untouched in the passenger seat, resting against the seatbelt as though it were a guest I'd driven home. I'd bring it to Marlene's tomorrow. She'd actually enjoy it. She'd appreciate it for what it was instead of turning it into a prop in some performance. At home, the silence greeted me like an old friend. No forced cheerfulness, no whispering, no tension humming beneath the surface. Just quiet. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table my wife and I had once eaten breakfast at every morning, and pulled out my phone, opened the group chat. For 2 years, I'd been nothing more than a placeholder in it. A name on a list, a padded number to make the circle look fuller, a ghost trailing behind the real family, Lena's chosen center of gravity. I scrolled upward through the months of messages. Birthday plans that didn't include me, photos I'd never been in, threads where my comments got no replies while others earned smiley faces and hearts. All of it carefully arranged to keep me at the edges. Then, without ceremony, I hit the button, left the group. A small pop-up appeared. Are you sure? Yes. God, yes. Then I deleted the entire thread. Every holiday I'd been cropped out of, every passive-aggressive announcement, every digital reminder that to them I had become an afterthought. Gone. I leaned back in my chair, let my shoulders fall, and felt something loosen inside me. A tight knot unspooling after years of being wound too tight. And I smiled. A real smile. One that reached the places inside me that had been shut in darkness for too long. Tomorrow was Christmas. I'd spend it with my son, my sister, and people who genuinely saw me, people who didn't use me as decoration or background noise, people who didn't turn kindness into leverage. Tomorrow would be different. Tonight, I would sleep better than I had in years. Morning arrived clear and sharp. The sun glinted off frost-covered rooftops. A breath fogged in the air like smoke. The cold bit at my fingers when I stepped outside. Real cold. The honest kind that wakes you up without asking. Today, I dressed simply. Jeans, a comfortable sweater, no careful presentation, no expectation of scrutiny or performance. Just me. I picked up the wine and added a box of chocolates I'd been saving for the right moment. This felt like the right moment. The drive to Marlene's took 20 minutes. Her street looked like something from a postcard. Small homes, tidy lawns, a few neighbors scraping frost off their windshields. Her house stood out only because of its warmth. Colored lights along the eaves, a wreath on the front door, a small tree glowing softly in the window. When I knocked, the door opened immediately. Marlene pulled me into a hug before I even said a word. "Merry Christmas," she murmured, squeezing tighter than usual. "Merry Christmas," I said back. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon rolls, baking, and fresh coffee brewing. A gentle smell, a lived-in smell, the kind that makes you feel welcome before anyone speaks. Grant sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug. He looked tired, yes, but lighter somehow, as though he'd stepped out from under a long shadow. "Dad," he said, "son." We didn't need more. Some relationships run on conversation, ours ran on presence. Breakfast was simple. Cinnamon rolls warm from the oven, scrambled eggs, a bowl of fruit. No performance. No 10-course spread meant to impress strangers. Just food meant to be shared among people who cared about each other. We talked casually. Weather, work, a funny story about Marlene's neighbor's runaway dog. Nothing heavy, nothing sharp. Nobody mentioned the night before. Around noon, Marlene pulled a ham from the oven, and we sat down for Christmas lunch. Just the three of us at a small table that felt absolutely right. The empty fourth chair wasn't a reminder of absence, it was a reminder of peace. "I'm glad you're here," Marlene said, glancing between us. "Me too," Grant said. "Me too," I echoed. After lunch, we exchanged gifts. Marlene adored the scarf I'd chosen. She held it up to the light and wrapped it around her neck immediately. Grant handed me a book I'd mentioned months earlier in passing, something I hadn't realized he'd remembered. And when he opened the first edition I'd found for him, his eyebrows shot up. "Dad, this is... How did you find this?" "I pay attention," I told him. He looked at me with something quiet and full in his eyes. "Yeah, you do." The afternoon drifted into comfort. We watched an old movie on Marlene's couch, the three of us tucked under blankets. The kind of film you've seen so many times you don't need to speak during it. Nobody checked their phones, nobody needed to. We simply existed. A small, steady circle of people who'd chosen each other. As the sun sank behind the trees and the sky shifted to violet, Grant's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then looked at me. "It's Lena," he said. "She wants to talk." "Do you want to talk to her?" I asked. He considered it for a moment, then shook his head. "Not today." He turned off his phone and set it face down on the coffee table. And just like that, the weight that had hovered over him all morning evaporated. We stayed at Marlene's until the stars came out and the neighborhood quieted. When it was finally time to go, Grant walked me to my car. "Thank you," he said, "for trusting me, for showing up, for not leaving." "I'll always show up for you," I told him. "Always." He nodded once, slow, steady. No more words were needed. We understood each other perfectly. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed quietly. I stayed home mostly, catching up on reading, organizing my garage, enjoying the silence that felt peaceful now instead of lonely. Grant called every day. Short calls, just checking in, telling me about his day, asking about mine, real conversations, the kind we hadn't had in years. "I'm staying at a hotel," he told me on day 3. "Just for now, until the lawyer figures everything out." "You can stay here," I offered. "I have the spare room." "I know, I might take you up on that. But I need a few days to think. Take all the time you need." On New Year's Eve, Marlene called and invited me over for dinner. Nothing fancy, just us. Grant's coming too. I arrived at 7 with the Bordeaux I'd originally bought for Lena's party. This time, it would be drunk by people who actually wanted me there. Marlene had made lasagna, and we sat around her small table, eating and talking and laughing. Real laughing. The kind that comes from actual joy, not performance. "I got a call from Mom," Marlene said at one point. She heard about what happened. "From who?" Grant asked. "Rachel, apparently. She was at the dinner. She called everyone." Grant groaned. "Of course she did." "Mom wanted me to tell you," Marlene looked at Grant, "that she's proud of you. And she wanted me to tell you," she looked at me, "that she's sorry she didn't notice sooner." I felt something tight in my chest loosen. "Tell her thank you." We toasted at midnight with the Bordeaux. Marlene raised her glass first. "To new beginnings," she said. "To family," Grant added. "To being seen," I finished. We clinked glasses and drank, and the wine tasted better than anything I'd had in years. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed, sunlight streaming through the windows. My phone showed a text from Grant, sent at 7 a.m. Moving into your spare room today if the offer still stands. Need help moving my stuff from the hotel? I texted back immediately. Offer always stands. Come whenever you're ready. He arrived at noon with 2 suitcases and a box of books. We set up the spare room together, making space in the closet, clearing off the desk, hanging his clothes. This is temporary, he said, just until I figure out what's next. Stay as long as you need, I told him. Seriously, there's no rush. That night we made dinner together. Spaghetti and meatballs, nothing fancy. We ate at my kitchen table and talked about his plans. The lawyer says the divorce should be straightforward. No kids, assets are documented, no fault state. 6 months, maybe less. And the house? She can buy me out or we sell it and split. I don't care which. I just want out. What about the loan? He looked at me. I'm paying you back. Every cent. I already set up a payment plan with my bank. You'll start seeing deposits next month. Grant, you don't have to. Yes, I do. It's not about the money. It's about doing what's right. About not being the person who takes advantage of your kindness. I didn't argue, just nodded. We fell into a routine over the next few weeks. Grant worked during the day, came home in the evenings. We'd make dinner together, watch TV, talk about our days. Simple things, normal things. He started smiling more. The tension in his shoulders eased. He looked younger somehow, like being away from Lena had let him breathe again. I forgot what this felt like, he said one night. Being comfortable, not walking on broken glass all the time. You deserve comfortable, I told him. So do you, Dad. February brought divorce papers and the first payment into my bank account. $1,500 from Grant, with a note. First of many, thank you for your patience. I called him immediately. You didn't have to send that much. I wanted to. I need to do this right. The divorce moved quickly. Lena didn't contest anything. According to Grant's lawyer, she was too worried about the potential assault charges to make waves. Grant had made it clear, cooperate with the divorce, and he wouldn't press charges. Fight him, and he'd go to the police with everything. She cooperated. By March, Grant had moved most of his belongings out of the house. By April, the papers were filed and the waiting period began. We celebrated his freedom quietly. Marlene came over, and we grilled burgers in my backyard, the first warm day of spring. Grant looked lighter than I'd seen him in years. I can't believe I stayed that long, he said at one point. I saw what she was doing. I knew it was wrong. But I kept making excuses. You got out, I said. That's what matters. Because of you. Because watching what she did to you finally made me see what she was doing to me. Marlene raised her glass. To seeing clearly. We drank to that. In May, the house sold. Grant's half of the proceeds, minus what he owed me, went into savings. He started looking at apartments, places of his own. You don't have to leave, I told him. I like having you here. I know, but I need to prove to myself that I can do this, that I can build something that's mine, on my own terms. I understood. Didn't like it, but understood. He found a place in June, a small 2-bedroom apartment near his work, with big windows and hardwood floors. We spent a weekend moving him in, setting up furniture, hanging pictures. You'll come over for dinner once I'm settled? He asked. Every week if you'll have me. Deal. The divorce finalized in July. Grant called me from the courthouse, his voice shaking with relief. It's done. It's finally done. How do you feel? Free. Dad, I feel free. That night, we celebrated at his new apartment. Just the two of us, pizza and beer, sitting on his balcony watching the sunset. I learned something through all this, Grant said, about what family really means, about who shows up and who just shows off. Yeah? You showed up, every time, even when it hurt, even when she made it hard. You just kept showing up. That's what fathers do. No, he said. That's what good fathers do. And I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I let her make you feel small. I'm sorry I didn't protect you the way you deserved. You protected me when it mattered most, I said. You switched the glasses. You exposed her. You stood up when it counted. I should have done it sooner. You did it when you could. That's enough. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn orange and pink. I'm proud of you, I said finally. In case I haven't said it enough, I'm proud of the man you are, the man you're becoming. Grant's eyes were bright. Thanks, Dad. Christmas came around again. A full year since everything had changed. This time we celebrated at Grant's apartment. He'd insisted on hosting, wanted to prove he could create something warm and welcoming on his own. Marlene arrived first, carrying dishes and decorations. I came with wine and gifts. Grant's apartment smelled like pine and roasting chicken. His tree was small but real, decorated with simple ornaments he'd collected over the year. No professional coordination, no expensive baubles, just honest decorations that meant something. We ate dinner at his small table, the three of us crowded together, knees bumping, passing dishes and laughing. Grant had cooked everything himself, and it was good. Not perfect, but good. Made with care. "I want to make a toast," Grant said, standing with his glass raised, "to the people who taught me what family really means. To Dad, who never stopped showing up. To Marlene, who always made space for us. And to second chances." "To second chances," Marlene echoed. "To being exactly where we're supposed to be," I added. We clinked glasses and drank. After dinner, we opened gifts. I'd gotten Grant a set of cooking knives. Good ones, professional ones. He'd been using cheap ones from a discount store, and I wanted him to have tools that would last. He opened the box and stared. "Dad, these are too much." "No," I said. "They're exactly right. You're building something here. You deserve good tools." Grant's gift to me was a photo album. Inside were pictures from the past year. The two of us at Marlene's, him moving into his apartment, us grilling in my backyard. Ordinary moments, documented and preserved. "I wanted you to have proof," he said, "that this year happened, that we made it through." I turned the pages slowly, looking at our faces in each photo, both of us smiling, both of us real. "Thank you," I said, my voice rough. We spent the evening talking and playing cards, the radio playing soft Christmas music in the background. Around 10, Marlene started gathering her things. "I should get going. Early morning tomorrow." We walked her to her car, hugged her goodbye, watched her drive away. Grant and I stood in the parking lot, breath fogging in the cold air. "Merry Christmas, Dad." "Merry Christmas, son." He hugged me tight, and I held on, remembering last year. Remembering the poisoned wine and the public humiliation and the moment everything had shattered. Remembering how Grant had saved me, how he'd switched the glasses and exposed the truth and chosen me over comfort. "Best Christmas yet," Grant said into my shoulder, and standing there in the cold December night, my son's arms around me, I realized he was right. This was better than any perfect dinner party or coordinated decorations or expensive displays. This was real. This was family. This was love that showed up and stayed, even when it was hard. I'd been humiliated. I'd been dismissed and overlooked and treated like furniture. But I'd survived. We'd survived. And the woman who'd tried to destroy me had lost everything. Her marriage, her reputation, her carefully constructed image, while I'd gained what actually mattered. Clean, legal, simple, perfect.